You're a burden, Margaret. We all feel it. Why don't you just admit it? Rachel said it with a bright Thanksgiving smile, her wineglass lifted slightly, as if she had just offered a harmless toast instead of a verdict. The Whitmore dining room went silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint crackle of the gas fireplace in the living room. 72-year-old Margaret Whitmore sat at the head of the long oak table she had once purchased with her late husband, Edward, nearly 30 years ago. Her posture straight, her silver hair swept neatly into a soft twist at the nape of her neck. The table was set with her fine china, ivory plates edged in gold that had seen every Thanksgiving since Daniel was a boy, every Christmas, every graduation dinner. She had brought her homemade cranberry sauce in a crystal bowl, the same one Edward used to insist made the berries taste sweeter. Around the table sat her son Daniel, 42, staring down at his plate of turkey as if it required deep study, and their two teenage children who shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure whether to laugh or look away. The scent of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and cinnamon sweet potatoes still lingered warmly in the air, but the warmth had drained from the room in an instant. Rachel leaned back in her chair, perfectly composed, her manicured hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. "I mean it kindly," she added, her tone sugar-coated. "We're just worried about you living alone in that big house. It's a lot. For everyone." Margaret did not flinch. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. Instead, she reached for her linen napkin and folded it carefully beside her plate, the motion slow and precise, as though she were demonstrating how to set a proper table. Her blue eyes moved from Rachel to Daniel, then briefly to the framed family portrait hanging on the far wall, a photograph taken 10 years earlier, when Edward was still alive and Daniel's smile had not yet learned how to hide behind discomfort. "Of course," Margaret said softly, her voice steady and almost gentle. "I wouldn't want to be a burden." The word hung there, heavy but controlled. Rachel's lips curved slightly upward, mistaking composure for defeat. Daniel cleared his throat but said nothing. Margaret lifted her water glass and took a small sip, her hands perfectly steady. No one noticed the shift in her gaze, the quiet calculation settling behind it. The grandchildren resumed pushing food around their plates, pretending normalcy. Rachel began discussing kitchen renovations, granite countertops, an expanded island, perhaps knocking down a wall to open things up. Margaret listened, nodding politely, as if she were merely a guest in a stranger's home. After a few moments she rose from her chair. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "I need a little air." No one stopped her. In the hallway, away from the dining room's glow, she slipped her phone from her handbag. The screen lit up against the dim light of the entryway. Her fingers moved without hesitation. She selected a name she had saved months ago, a name she had hoped she would never need to press. When the call connected, her voice was low and composed. "Michael," she said, "it's time." Then she ended the call, smoothed her jacket, and returned to the table with the same small, pleasant smile she had worn all evening. Rachel continued talking, unaware that the word burden had just rewritten the future of the Whitmore family. Margaret returned to her seat as if nothing had shifted, as if the air had not changed density in the hallway only moments before. She picked up the serving spoon and asked Daniel whether he would like more stuffing, her voice light, almost maternal, the same tone she had used when he was 8 years old and insisted he did not like green beans. Daniel shook his head without looking at her. Rachel resumed speaking about the renovation plans, describing cabinet samples and paint swatches as though she were narrating a lifestyle program, her confidence swelling in the absence of resistance. The grandchildren began talking about school, grateful for a safer subject, their words tumbling quickly over one another in relief. Margaret listened carefully, not to the conversation, but to the rhythm of the room. She noticed how easily Rachel filled the silence, how Daniel allowed it, how the children watched their mother before they laughed. It was a small detail, But small details had always told her more than declarations ever did. She had spent 45 years married to a man who built a regional supply company from a 2-truck operation into something steady and respected, and she had learned that power rarely raised its voice. It simply positioned itself and waited. Rachel reached for the gravy boat and said lightly that it might be time for Margaret to consider downsizing, perhaps to a community where people her age could socialize more. She smiled again, a polished expression meant to sound practical. Margaret nodded once. "I will think about that," she said, and the words were neither agreement nor refusal. Daniel finally spoke, suggesting they could help her sort through the house after the holidays. He said it gently, but there was an eagerness beneath it, as though logistics were already forming in his mind. Margaret watched him closely. She saw not cruelty but weakness. It was the kind that bent toward the strongest voice in the room. She remembered the day Edward signed the updated trust documents 6 months before his passing. His hand firm despite his diagnosis. He had looked at her over the polished mahogany desk and said, "You must always hold the final say." At the time she had thought he was being overly cautious. Now she understood he had been precise. Dessert was served. Pumpkin pie, whipped cream. Coffee poured into delicate cups that had survived 3 moves and countless holidays. Rachel laughed at something on her phone and showed Daniel a message from a contractor. Margaret stood once more, this time to retrieve her coat from the hallway closet. "Are you leaving already?" Rachel asked, feigning surprise. "It is getting late," Margaret replied calmly. It was only 8:15 in the evening. She slipped her arms into her wool coat, smoothing the lapels with measured care. Daniel walked her to the door, his expression uncertain. "Mom, she did not mean it the way it sounded," he offered quietly. Margaret looked at him, really looked at him, and placed her gloved hand gently on his cheek. "Words always mean exactly what they are meant to mean," she said. Then she stepped out into the crisp November air, the cold settling around her like clarity. Behind her the house glowed warmly, unaware that the foundation beneath it had already begun to shift. Margaret drove home slowly that night, her headlights cutting a narrow path through the quiet suburban streets lined with bare maple trees and darkened windows. The neighborhood looked peaceful, every porch light glowing softly, every driveway occupied by familiar vehicles, but she felt the subtle distance between houses, the space that existed even when people believed they were close. When she pulled into her own driveway, the large colonial home stood exactly as it always had, white siding trimmed in black shutters, the American flag still hanging neatly beside the front door. Edward had insisted on replacing that flag every 4th of July without fail. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the silence, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. She was not trembling. She was thinking. Inside, the house greeted her with the faint scent of cedar and lemon polish. She hung her coat carefully in the front closet and walked through the living room where the grand piano rested beneath the front window. A thin layer of dust shimmered under the lamplight. She had not played since Edward passed, yet she had never considered selling it. Some things were not meant to be liquidated. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water and leaned lightly against the marble countertop, her mind moving through years rather than hours. She remembered the first Thanksgiving in this house. Daniel, only 12 years old, helping his father carry folding chairs from the garage. Edward had carved the turkey while Margaret prepared gravy, and afterward he had raised his glass and said that gratitude meant honoring the people who built the table, not just the ones who sat at it. That sentence returned now with unusual clarity. She set the glass down and walked toward the study at the back of the house. The desk was still organized exactly as Edward had left it, leather blotter aligned, fountain pen resting diagonally across a small notepad. Margaret opened the top drawer and retrieved a slim folder she had reviewed months earlier when Michael first suggested a revision to the trust. At the time she had agreed quietly, not because she expected betrayal, but because she believed in preparation. The updated documents ensured that control remained firmly in her hands for as long as she was of sound mind. Distribution would not occur by assumption. It would occur by intention. She sat in Edward's old chair and allowed herself one long, steady breath. Rachel had believed that a word spoken publicly would diminish her. Daniel had believed silence would soften the insult. Both had underestimated the woman who had balanced company books in the early years, negotiated supplier contracts, and paid off the mortgage 8 years ahead of schedule. Margaret did not confuse kindness with surrender. She did not confuse age with fragility. She closed the folder gently and returned it to the drawer. Tomorrow there would be a meeting scheduled. Papers would be reviewed. Provisions would be clarified. Tonight she simply walked through her home, touching the back of the dining chair Edward favored, straightening a picture frame, turning off lights one by one. Outside, the November wind brushed softly against the windows. Inside, the house remained steady. And so did she. The following morning, Margaret woke before sunrise, as she had done for decades, her internal clock still disciplined by years of managing early deliveries and school schedules. Pale light filtered through the bedroom curtains, casting a soft gray across the hardwood floors. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the heating system and the distant sound of a garbage truck somewhere down the street. Nothing in the house had changed overnight. The walls still held framed photographs of anniversaries and graduations. The hallway runner still lay perfectly straight. Yet something invisible had shifted, not in the structure but in the understanding. She rose, dressed carefully in a navy sweater and pressed slacks, and made her way to the kitchen. Coffee brewed slowly in the stainless steel machine Edward had insisted on purchasing after researching reviews for weeks. She poured herself a cup and carried it to the breakfast nook overlooking the backyard, where frost coated the lawn in a thin silver layer. As she sat, her mind returned not to the insult itself, but to the pattern that had preceded it. Rachel's comments about assisted living had begun subtly the previous spring. There had been brochures left casually on the counter after a Sunday visit, suggestions framed as concern. Daniel had echoed those sentiments months later, mentioning how large the house felt for one person. Margaret had nodded each time, neither agreeing nor resisting. She had simply observed. She remembered the afternoon Rachel had asked about access to the financial accounts, suggesting it would be easier for Daniel to help manage payments. Margaret had declined politely, explaining that she preferred to handle her own affairs. Rachel's smile had tightened then, just slightly. It was a small detail, but Margaret never ignored small details. She finished her coffee and rinsed the cup, placing it carefully in the dishwasher. By 9 o'clock, her phone vibrated softly against the kitchen counter. Michael Harris did not waste time with pleasantries. He confirmed that he had reviewed the trust provisions, and that any modifications would require Daniel's formal acknowledgement. Margaret thanked him calmly and scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon at his downtown office. After ending the call, she stood for a moment at the sink, gazing at the bare branches beyond the window. She did not feel anger. Anger was loud and inefficient. What she felt instead was clarity. Rachel had assumed that age meant dependence. Daniel had assumed that inheritance meant inevitability. Both assumptions rested on comfort rather than fact. Margaret walked to the hallway closet and retrieved a small leather portfolio containing copies of property deeds and investment summaries. She spread them neatly across the dining table, aligning each document with care. This house was not a burden. It was paid in full. The investment accounts were not shared. They were designated with conditions Edward had insisted upon. She gathered the papers back into the portfolio and placed it by the front door. Outside, a delivery truck slowed briefly before continuing down the street. Inside, Margaret felt something settle into place, steady and immovable. She had spent her life building stability. She would not allow a single careless word to dismantle it. The meeting tomorrow would not be emotional. It would be precise. The following afternoon, Margaret parked her car in the public garage across from Michael Harris's office building, a 12-story brick structure that had housed law firms and accounting practices for more than 3 decades. She stepped out into the cool November air, her wool coat buttoned neatly, the leather portfolio tucked securely under her arm. The city moved at its usual weekday pace, business professionals crossing intersections with purpose, traffic lights changing in steady rhythm. Inside the elevator, she watched the floor numbers illuminate one by one, her reflection faintly visible in the polished steel walls. She did not rehearse speeches. She did not revisit the dinner in her mind. She focused on facts. When she entered Michael's office, he stood to greet her, offering a firm handshake and a respectful nod. He had worked with Edward for years and had transitioned seamlessly to representing Margaret. After his passing, they sat across from one another at a wide conference table, documents already arranged in orderly stacks. Michael reviewed the current trust structure, explaining in clear, measured language that Margaret retained full control over the primary residence, the investment accounts, and the business assets that continued to generate quarterly income. Daniel was named as a beneficiary under specific conditions that included demonstrated financial responsibility and respectful conduct toward the grantor. Margaret listened without interruption. She asked precise questions about enforcement clauses and amendment procedures. Michael explained that any modification could be executed immediately, provided she signed the updated documents. There was also the option to appoint an independent trustee, someone outside the family, to ensure impartial management in the future. Margaret considered this carefully. She thought of Rachel's confident tone at the dinner table, of Daniel's silence, of the assumption that proximity equaled entitlement. "Prepare the revision," she said calmly. "I would like to remove Daniel as primary successor trustee, and assign that role to your firm." Michael did not appear surprised. He nodded once and began outlining the necessary paperwork. The language was formal, precise, leaving little room for interpretation. Margaret signed each page deliberately, her signature steady and unmistakable. When the final document was placed back into its folder, Michael confirmed that the changes would take effect immediately upon filing. He also advised that Daniel would be formally notified within 48 hours, as required by law. Margaret rose from her chair, adjusting the cuff of her sweater. "Please ensure that the notification is thorough," she said evenly. "I would prefer clarity over comfort." Michael assured her it would be handled professionally. As she left the building, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. She paused briefly before stepping into the crosswalk, watching the light shift from red to green. There was no triumph in her expression, no visible satisfaction, only resolve. She understood that inheritance was not a reward for biology. It was a reflection of trust, and trust, once questioned, required structure rather than sentiment. She walked back to her car, the leather portfolio lighter now, not because it contained fewer papers, but because its purpose had been fulfilled. The foundation had been adjusted. The rest would follow in due course. 48 hours later, Daniel was standing in his kitchen when his phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. Rachel was at the island scrolling through paint samples on her tablet, sunlight pouring through the wide windows and reflecting off the polished granite she had proudly chosen 2 years earlier. Daniel hesitated before answering, stepping into the adjacent hallway for privacy. The voice on the other end introduced itself as a representative from Harris & Associates, and requested a brief meeting to review recent amendments to the Whitmore Family Trust. Daniel frowned, confusion tightening across his features. "Amendments," he repeated, his tone uncertain. The representative explained calmly that documentation had been filed and that, as a named beneficiary, he was required to receive formal notice. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning. When Daniel returned to the kitchen, Rachel looked up immediately. "Who was that?" she asked. Daniel relayed the conversation, attempting to sound unconcerned, but the shift in his expression was impossible to disguise. Rachel set her tablet down slowly. "What kind of amendments?" she pressed. Daniel shook his head. "They did not say." For the first time since Thanksgiving, the confidence in Rachel's posture faltered slightly. The next morning, Daniel sat across from Michael Harris in the same conference room Margaret had occupied just days earlier. The documents were placed neatly before him, language clear and unmistakable. He learned that he had been removed as successor trustee, and that administrative control would remain under independent management. Distribution conditions had been clarified. Access privileges were no longer assumed. Daniel read each paragraph twice, his jaw tightening as the implications settled in. He asked whether this decision was final. Michael answered evenly that the grantor retained full authority, and that the amendments were legally binding. There was no accusation in the room, no raised voices. Only structure. When Daniel returned home, Rachel met him at the door, expectation written plainly across her face. He handed her the summary letter without speaking. She scanned the page quickly, color draining from her expression as she reached the final clause. "She cannot do this," Rachel said, though the statement lacked certainty. Daniel sank into a chair at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. "She already has," he replied quietly. Across town, Margaret was watering the small potted fern near her living room window, sunlight warming the hardwood floors beneath her feet. Her phone remained silent. She did not wait for it to ring. She understood that realization required time. She moved methodically through her morning routine, sorting mail, reviewing a quarterly investment statement, scheduling a roof inspection for early spring. Outside, a neighbor waved while walking a golden retriever along the sidewalk. Margaret returned the gesture with a small nod and a polite smile. The world had not changed dramatically. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no public announcement. Yet the balance of assumption had shifted permanently. In the quiet steadiness of her home, Margaret understood that respect, once compromised, required boundaries rather than arguments. And boundaries once established did not need to be explained. Daniel did not call his mother that evening. He paced the length of the kitchen instead, the formal letter still lying open on the counter like an accusation written in neutral ink. Rachel stood near the sink, arms folded tightly across her chest, her earlier confidence replaced with a sharp, restless energy. She read the letter again, as though repetition might reveal a loophole hidden between the lines. The language was clear. Authority remained solely with Margaret. Oversight had been reassigned. Distribution would be determined at the discretion of the grantor under newly defined standards. "She overreacted," Rachel said finally, though her voice carried less conviction than usual. Daniel did not respond immediately. He stared at the dark window above the sink, seeing only his own reflection and the faint outline of the backyard. "It was one comment," Rachel continued, her tone softening slightly. "We were trying to help." Daniel turned toward her then, his expression conflicted. "You called her a burden," he said quietly. Rachel exhaled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It was a figure of speech. Everyone knew that. Daniel thought of the silence that had followed those words, of the way his mother had folded her napkin with deliberate care. He remembered the steadiness in her eyes when she said she would not want to be a burden. At the time he had interpreted it as hurt. Now he recognized it as distance. The following afternoon, Rachel suggested they visit Margaret in person. "We can explain," she said. "Clear the air." Daniel hesitated but eventually agreed. They drove across town in near silence, the familiar streets feeling oddly unfamiliar. When they pulled into the driveway of the large colonial house, Daniel noticed the yard was neatly trimmed, the flag by the door freshly straightened. Nothing suggested instability. Margaret answered the door herself, dressed in a soft gray cardigan and slacks, her posture as composed as ever. "Daniel," she said warmly. "Rachel." Her tone held no edge, no visible resentment. She invited them inside, offering coffee as though it were any ordinary Sunday afternoon. They sat in the living room where sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating framed photographs and polished wood surfaces. Rachel began speaking first, explaining that the dinner conversation had been misunderstood, that concern had been mistaken for criticism. Margaret listened attentively, hands folded lightly in her lap. When Rachel finished, a quiet settled over the room. Margaret turned to Daniel. "Do you feel I am a burden?" she asked calmly. The question was simple, direct. Daniel shifted in his seat, searching for words that would soften the moment. "No," he said eventually, though the hesitation lingered in the space between them. Margaret nodded once. "Words matter," she replied, "especially when spoken in front of family." There was no accusation in her voice, only clarity. Rachel attempted to speak again, but Margaret gently raised her hand. "The trust has been adjusted to ensure stability," she said evenly. "It is not punishment. It is structure." Daniel felt the finality in her tone. The conversation did not escalate. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures. Only the quiet realization that assumptions had consequences. When Daniel and Rachel left, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Inside the house, Margaret returned to her seat by the window, the room peaceful and unchanged. The boundary had been drawn without anger, and it would remain. The house felt quieter after Daniel and Rachel left, not because it had been loud before, but because intention now occupied the silence. Margaret remained seated by the window for several minutes, watching a pair of sparrows hop across the edge of the lawn. She did not replay the conversation in her mind. There was no need. Every word had been deliberate. Every pause had been measured. Later that evening, Daniel sat alone at his kitchen table long after Rachel had gone upstairs. The overhead light cast a pale circle across the granite surface, illuminating the letter from Michael Harris that he had folded and unfolded several times. He thought about the way his mother had asked her question, not accusing, not defensive, simply direct. "Do you feel I am a burden?" The simplicity of it unsettled him more than anger would have. He remembered childhood evenings when she had stayed up late helping him study for exams, remembered the way she had quietly transferred funds to support the early expansion of his own consulting business without ever mentioning repayment. He had never considered those actions leverage. They had felt like foundation. Now he wondered when he had begun treating them as background. Upstairs, Rachel lay awake as well, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above the bed. She replayed the visit in her mind, focusing on Margaret's tone rather than her words. There had been no hostility, no raised voice, only composure. Rachel had built her confidence on the assumption that older generations softened under pressure, that discomfort could be managed through suggestion. She had not anticipated structure and response. The following week passed without further confrontation. Margaret continued her routine with steady precision. She attended her book club on Tuesday evening, exchanged polite conversation with neighbors while collecting her mail, and reviewed quarterly investment summaries at the dining room table each morning. She instructed Michael to finalize additional provisions ensuring charitable allocations would receive priority before any discretionary distribution. It was not retaliation. It was alignment. Daniel eventually called his mother one afternoon, his tone careful. He asked how she was feeling. Margaret answered truthfully that she felt well. He hesitated before apologizing, the word emerging quietly as though unfamiliar. Margaret listened without interruption. "Growth is not comfortable," she said gently, "but it is necessary." She did not mention the trust. She did not reference the dinner. The conversation ended calmly. Across town, Rachel sensed the distance expanding rather than shrinking. Invitations from Margaret became formal rather than frequent. Decisions were no longer discussed in advance. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. In the quiet steadiness of her home, Margaret understood that restoration did not require confrontation. It required consistency. Respect, once recalibrated, did not announce itself loudly. It revealed itself over time through behavior. The holiday decorations remained stored neatly in labeled boxes in the attic. Whether they would be unpacked at this house next year remained uncertain. What was certain was that Margaret would decide, not out of emotion but out of clarity. And clarity, once achieved, did not waver. Winter settled gradually over the neighborhood, covering lawns in a thin layer of frost each morning and leaving the air sharp and clean. Margaret adjusted to the season with the same steadiness she had shown in every other transition of her life. She arranged a modest wreath on the front door and placed a single strand of white lights along the banister, not for display, but for continuity. The house did not need extravagance to feel complete. It needed intention. In early December, Daniel called again, his voice more measured than before. He asked if she would consider hosting a small holiday dinner, just immediate family, nothing elaborate. There was hesitation in his tone, the kind that suggested humility rather than expectation. Margaret paused before answering, not to create suspense, but to evaluate sincerity. "You are welcome to visit," she said calmly. "We can share a meal." She did not promise tradition. She offered presence. When the evening arrived, Daniel and the children stepped into the house with noticeable restraint. Rachel followed, quieter than usual, carrying a store-bought dessert rather than a suggestion. The dining room table was set with simple white plates and polished silverware. No ornate centerpiece, no elaborate display. Margaret had prepared roast chicken, green beans, and mashed potatoes, dishes chosen for familiarity rather than symbolism. The conversation remained careful at first, as though everyone understood that volume could disrupt something fragile. Daniel thanked his mother for hosting. Rachel complimented the meal without embellishment. At one point, one of the grandchildren asked about a story from Daniel's childhood, and Margaret recounted it gently, her voice steady, her eyes warm but reserved. There was no reference to the trust, no mention of legal documents or authority. The boundary did not need repetition. It had already been established. After dinner, Daniel lingered while Rachel helped clear the plates. He stood beside his mother near the kitchen doorway and said quietly, "I should have spoken up that night." Margaret met his gaze without accusation. "Understanding comes in its own time," she replied. "What matters is what follows." Daniel nodded, absorbing the weight of that statement. Later, as the family prepared to leave, Rachel approached Margaret directly. Her words were simple and unadorned. "I am sorry," she said. There was no elaborate justification, no attempt to soften the memory. Margaret regarded her calmly, measuring tone rather than phrasing. "Respect is not a favor," she answered gently. "It is a standard." Rachel inclined her head slightly, accepting the distinction. When the front door closed and the driveway emptied, Margaret returned to the dining room. The plates had been washed, the chairs pushed neatly beneath the table. The house felt quiet again but not strained. She turned off the overhead light and stood for a moment in the soft glow of the hallway lamp. Authority had not required anger. Correction had not required humiliation. She had not raised her voice. She had not sought revenge. She had simply adjusted the structure and allowed others to understand its strength. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, covering the lawn in a fresh layer of white. Inside, Margaret Whitmore stood at the center of her home, steady as ever, no longer mistaken for anything less than what she had always been.